Hi, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of My Words, Our Journey. I'm Monty. Let's continue with our story, starting today with Chapter 5. The taxi pulled up close to the side entrance where Madison could see the sign introducing a truck driver special, a 16-ounce sirloin, and all the fixings for only $9.95. There were semi-trucks buzzing around the oversized parking lot, weaving in and around each other, some trying to get in line for fuel, while others were just trying to find a place to park for a few hours of well-deserved rest. Entering the heavy glass door, she turned, wanting to return to the taxi, the one she watched make a left out of the lot and back towards town. Madison was not sure why she felt so anxious about her lunch date, other than the fact she could not remember the last time she'd been out of the house without Ryan. She felt independent, hesitant, and more like a child with every step. Still, she moved. Searching, she found Megan in the smoking section, but she was not alone. The four women from the winter festival were all sitting around, apparently waiting for her to arrive. Each either held a cigarette or had one in an ashtray in the center of the table. There was a fifth woman with them. She was much younger and seemed somewhat out of place, more than just the fact she was not participating in the nicotine frenzy. With no way to hide her surprise and shock, Madison just smiled and took the remaining seat. From that moment on, any anxiety from anyone at the table vanished. It was as if they had been girlfriends since high school. They talked, they laughed, they ate, and finally they cried. They cried as each told their story, each different but the same. Each made excuses, without even realizing it, and each caused the rest to shed tears, without apology. They were oblivious to the truckers that occasionally stared just a little too long. Each had been drawn into the impromptu therapy session. Megan had asked Sandy Travis to talk about her situation first, and Sandy did not need to be asked twice. She was ready for someone to listen to her, and she took full advantage of the opportunity. At the young age of 20, she had married her college sweetheart, a young man on the fast track at the local bank. They had bought a home, new cars, and started their new life. She explained how everything was even better than she had dreamed as a young girl, until they found out his position was being eliminated at the bank. His fast track took a detour and led to the unemployment line, and her dream life had quickly become a nightmare. Each time there was a collection call or they had to ask their parents for a loan, he sank deeper, until he could not sink no more, and he took their marriage with him. Drugs and the lies that came with it, cheating and more lies, and finally the physical abuse and the lies she must now tell to cover it up. Her parents were not listening to her complaints. They did not believe in divorce for any reason, and repeatedly lectured their only daughter about how her marriage had to be worked at. Her mother had even suggested at one point that Sandy should be more supportive. Madison had not smoked anything since high school, but there were packs lying around the table, and she found herself reaching for one, and the leopard designed lighter within reach. No one seemed to notice. She was on her second when it was her turn to speak. It was not in her nature, and at first it was clumsy, shy, and childlike, really. But with an encouraging nod from one of the ladies, she pressed on, leaving out nothing, not even the sleeping pills she had held when the phone rang only 2 days earlier. For Madison, it was better than any expensive therapy. Next, Megan shocked the group with her tale. They were each ready for a story similar to the first two. None were prepared for what they heard. Megan, calmly, without hesitation, explained how she had made a mistake a few years ago and how her husband had used that mistake to keep her under his control. She was lonely and had fallen for a much younger man. Her husband had hired a private detective and today still held the pictures from her misfortunate lapse in judgment. He had not wanted a divorce. No, to the contrary, he had almost seemed pleased with the situation she had inadvertently put him in. Complete control. Threatening to leave her penniless and without any rights to her children if she didn't do anything and everything he asked. Megan had painted herself into a corner she could not get out of. She told of horrible abuse. The tears came when she started to describe the love she had for her four children and the promise she had made to herself not to let them get hurt by her mistakes. Tammy and Sharon had had nothing to compare to what the group had just heard. They had both been victims of alcohol and its grips on the men in their lives. Both had the bruises to show of it, and neither had the courage or strength to walk away. And finally, everyone's attention turned to Kelsey, the young woman Madison had found out through a conversation with Sharon's sister in law. Chelsea looked from left to right and then back again, not sure what everyone was waiting or expecting of her. I'm sorry. I have no story to tell. My marriage is fine. Well, better than fine. I'm happy. She was almost apologetic in her tone. I can only pray that things I've heard today will make me stronger and work harder at my marriage. And I'll pray for each of you as well. Looking down so as not to make eye contact, and without another word, she was done. When Madison noticed the time, she was stunned. Ryan would be home soon, and she would be a statistic if she was not there when he arrived. All agreed it was time to go, and each agreed they would do it again real soon. As they were gathering their belongings and saying their goodbyes, Sharon leaned over to Madison and whispered, Chelsea may need this sort of thing more than the rest of us. She's still in denial. Stopping to take a puff, she continued only after blowing her smoke straight up into the ceiling fan that struggled to move the smoky air above the group. I've seen the bruises behind the sunglasses, and I know for a fact she's been to the emergency room twice in the last 6 months for broken bones. My brother has always had a temper. Tammy offered Madison a ride home so she wouldn't have to wait for the taxi, and as they were all walking outside, Sharon made a statement that would eventually change everything. How much would our lives change if the men in them were gone for good? It was the last thing said after a long afternoon of cleansing. Chapter 6. The group met the next week and each week after, spending more and more time getting to know each other and less time feeling sorry for themselves. The positive vibe that surrounded the table was needed by all, and for some, it was the opportunity during the week to truly be themselves. The non-judgmental way they spoke to each other was not commonplace for the five. Yes, there were only five the second week and each week to follow. Chelsea had decided not to take part. She had sent word through Sharon that she wished them all well and would continue to pray for their happiness. Madison had not known why, but she felt the group had lost a vital member. Intentionally or not, the five talked less and less about their worse halves and more about positive things. They had decided to start reading the same book and talk each week about it. They had found similar shows they all liked to watch, and they caught up whomever may have missed that week's episode. It was the company, not the topics, that each looked forward to in the end of the day. Tammy commented one week on how her husband had noticed a difference in her. He accused her of having an affair, and after pausing for a moment, she laughed and said, I guess in a way I am. Each week I meet 4 women without my husband knowing about it, and I enjoy that time more than any other time during the week. Others nodded in agreement. It was the pain that had brought them together, and it was the joy that kept them coming back. One afternoon that changed, however. It had been Sandy's birthday earlier in the week, so they were celebrating with desserts when the phone within Sharon's purse began to vibrate. Seeing the number on the display, she excused herself and walked towards the back door leading to where the truckers parked. Through the glass, Madison could see her pacing and body movements. It was not a call delivering good news. Something had happened. When she re-entered the diner, she was barely able to stand. It took her 4 lunch companions to calm her down enough for her to speak, and when she did, the 4 huddled around her could not believe what she had said. The call had been from her mother-in-law. Chelsea was gone. The information she had received in the short call had been sketchy, but what she did know rang only too true within the confines of their group. Apparently, Chelsea had come home from work unexpectedly and found her husband, Sharon's brother, with a woman from down the street. When she tried to leave, unwilling to listen to his threats or demands, he had punched her so hard in the face that it shattered bone. The punch also caused her to fall headfirst into the driveway, where she died of head trauma. It was the mistress that had witnessed the whole thing from the kitchen window and had called 911. For trying to leave, she had paid the ultimate price. That was Madison's thought as she relit the cigarette she had been holding. Chapter 7. The tie he wore was cutting off the circulation above his neck. He literally thought if he looked in the mirror, he could see his head enlarged, and was the shape of a grape, ripe and ready for the picking. The sad part was it had been his idea. It was depressing but true. He had bonded more with Kenny and Sean than with his team members he had worked with and known for what seemed like forever. That had been the reason for two calls he had made earlier in the week inviting the pair to dinner. He had already mapped it out long before the calls were placed. Each of his dinner companions would drive approximately an hour while he would travel 3 hours one way. It was worth it. As he pulled on his collar for the 13th time, Leonard thought about his plan, his retirement plan. The wheels had begun turning after the death of his daughter. It may have been the only thing that kept him going through this whole ordeal. The only thing he had gotten out of his therapy sessions, really, having something to look forward to. When it was all said and done, the only thing he wanted then and now was to sell his meager belongings, hit the road south, and end up in Florida, in a marina, on a boat he'd call home. Those were his thoughts, the only thoughts now that made him almost happy, at least content. The job, his lifestyle, and the last case, Miles Humphreys, had taken their toll. He had a plan, and he wanted two of his friends to hear the news in person, no matter the distance. Leonard still had the nightmares he could not understand, but at least now they were mixed with dreams of warm water, warm weather, middle-aged women with deep tans, and the rocking motion of his boat on the water. While Leonard headed their way, Kenny and Sean were not thinking about retirement, the job, or bad guys. No, each had better things going on. Kenny was in love, straight and to the point. Kenny would be the first to admit he had found the woman he was going to marry, raise a family, and grow old with. Only two problems. First, she had no idea how he felt. And second, she was a defense attorney who made good money getting the guys he took down back on the street. The first he was working on, the second he felt he could get over in time. The guys had decided long ago that her beauty did not make up for her actions in the courthouse. She was good at her job, and for that, she was disliked throughout the precinct. Truth be told, she rubbed Kenny the wrong way more than once in the courtroom. There was something the other men did not notice, however. She had never, as far as he knew, ever tried to claim the police or detectives were incompetent, unethical, or did not follow procedure to get her clients off. She didn't need to. If there was a way, she found it. Kenny returned from the child predator case and went straight to court. The trial of 3 of the 8 gang members involved in a murder case where he was the lead detective started one day after his triumphant return. Rachel was the defense attorney for 2 of the 3 young men on trial for their lives, and she had done such a professional job and had made others in the courtroom look somewhat amateurish. It was no surprise when the third accused decided to change lawyers and move to Rachel's side of the table after the first week. At first, it was true, he was attracted to the long legs, the classy attire, and not to mention the way she carried herself. But, in the end, it was the hours of watching her do the little things, the way she smirked at her counterparts, the attention she paid to her clients between sessions, the way her nose wiggled when she laughed. It all grabbed him and never let go. That was the funny part. Kenny had thought he had found the one on 2 different occasions, but he had worked through it and had moved on, not ready for that kind of commitment at the time. This time, there was no working through it. Instead, every day in court, he found new reasons to find her both attractive and enduring. Lunch was the best he had done so far. It was not planned, but rather the result of a crowded cafeteria within the walls of justice. Kenny had turned away 2 other people from the lone chair with the hopes of saving it for Rachel, whom he had noticed in the salad aisle. Until she was in reach, he had placed his daytimer and phone on the chair, marking the territory. At the last moment, they were moved, and she was offered the prime real estate. The conversation was light, the connection was faint, and he loved every minute of it. He had decided she was not to be rushed. Instead, he would have to move slowly. She was not the type you had more than one chance with. He was in love, as she was in the heat of battle in the courtroom. Love would have to wait. Still, he found any way possible to be close to her. Court, which he always dreaded in the past, now was welcomed. It was new to him, and he did not want to lose it. The topic, he had decided, would not be brought up with his dinner companions. He did not know them well enough, and neither seemed really to be interested in sitting around having a drink talking about each other's love lives. Kenny was curious about tonight. It was as if Leonard had a hidden agenda. Whatever. He was looking forward to a nice dinner, catching up with the pair, and enjoying a few drinks. Besides, he had only recently purchased a year-old Acura TL and rarely had the pleasure of driving it more than a short distance. Sean was looking forward to tonight also. He had news, and could not believe when Leonard called and suggested the three men get together for dinner. Outside of a few at the bureau, Jill was the only one he had told about his promotion. There was a small increase in his pay grade, a slightly longer title on his desk plate, but more importantly, there was an office he didn't have to share with anyone. His hobby was now his career. After the Predator case, word was that Brass was considering such a move. Sean did not take much stock in it, however. He had been overlooked and sidestepped one too many times to be optimistic. When he had been told, Sean became so emotional he left the room, moments before his slide down the wall in the third stall to the left in the men's room. There was no helping it. He was overjoyed at the point of collapse. It was not mere happiness for him. No, he realized how proud Jill would be, and even the slightest increase in his pay would help reduce her stress level each month. Thank goodness no one came looking for him when he excused himself so abruptly. That, along with the fact that nature had not called anyone on the fifth floor, had been a miracle Sean thanked God for before he straightened up and returned to the office down the hall. With a smile and the excuse of an upset stomach, he had been battling for the last few days. Enough time had passed, and he felt comfortable with the idea of telling Kenny and Leonard without much chance of a similar episode, especially if he waited till after the first round of drinks. Sean wanted to thank the pair, in person, for his recent fortune. The Defender of Children case had been good for him. Chapter 8. Madison was having a good week. Ryan had been gone on a golf outing and would not be home until late tomorrow evening. Even so, she did not dare drive the sedan parked in the garage. The thought barely entered her mind, and then it was gone. Ryan had no doubt recorded the miles before he left with his buddies. She had learned that the hard way over a year ago. If she looked really close, she would still make out the scar on her shoulder from where he had hit her, and she had hit the corner of the dining room table. The taxi was too hot and stuffy, and the driver had used way too much air freshener trying to remove the cigar smoke. But she was not bothered. Madison was on her way to meet her friends. It had taken a while, but they now truly were friends, the only ones she had, hers alone, not Ryan's friends' wives, who only tolerated her at work functions. No, these were hers, and Ryan knew nothing about them. She was not the first one there. After paying the fare and heading towards the side entrance, Madison could see Sandy was deep into a stack of what appeared to be papers on the table in front of her. Curious, Madison thought. Had she brought homework for them? When she entered, Sandy quickly placed the material under the table. So swiftly, Madison decided to let it go. After everyone arrived, however, the pile of papers reappeared and Sandy explained what she had been working on. It was not homework. On the contrary, it was a large stack of police reports, all relating to spousal abuse and the women that had been affected. Sandy explained how this was just the most recent and only for the 3 counties within their immediate area. No one interrupted. It seemed Sandy was using this as some kind of therapy, and none of the women wanted to stop her. When she was done, there was a sense from the table that she was now waiting on some kind of a response. Finally, after a few awkward moments, Megan spoke for everyone at the table. Sandy, we wish this had never happened to any of us, especially young Chelsea. And we all know this is going on everywhere, but what can we do? The papers report it, the news shows do specials, and the police fill out reports, and it still continues. Their waitress had brought fresh drinks and was ready to take their food order, so the conversation ended briefly. Not briefly enough for Madison. Sandy replied to Megan as soon as the perky brunette headed back towards the kitchen. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if we helped, reached out to Chelsea, well, maybe she'd still be here. There were those of us that knew she was lying about her marriage when she was with us the other day, and still we ignored it. We're as guilty, if not more so, than the media or the police. I say it's time we take matters into our own hands. I say we. There was a pause while she chose her words cautiously. I say we put an end to the abuse, at least in our cases, for good. And when that is complete, Then we can think about others. But first, we have to take care of the ones in our group. Megan was already gathering her things while the others watched. Megan spoke in a low voice, but the tone told the listeners she meant business. Looking straight across the table at Sandy, "You have taken our group, tried to turn it into a militia. I can't be part of this. I'm sorry, I must go." Before Sandy or the others could voice their opinion on the matter, she was gone, leaving behind a confused and worried group of ladies, none wanting this to be the end of their weekly gatherings, none wanting to lose the friendships they had desperately desired. The matter was not discussed again that day. Lunch was brief, small talk was to the minimum, and the goodbyes heartfelt. No one was sure if this was the last time they would be together. Chapter 9. Ryan was more than 4 hours late, and Madison was tired. Not worried or even frustrated, just plain tired. She had prepared him a nice welcome home dinner, ready at 7 when he said he would be home. She had cleaned and organized, showered, and put on one of his favorite outfits. Madison was tired, not merely for the game they played, but also physically. He would not mention what she had done right, but would harp on what she had done wrong or missed. Tired, because even with all she had done, she knew there was a chance he would come home mad about something totally unrelated to her, and she would suffer. Tired because there was no chance or no choice for her. So, at 1:40 in the morning, when he did decide to come home, it was no surprise Madison had retired to bed and was fast asleep when her irate husband came storming into the room. Wakened by his yelling, she was not clear what was happening or even where she was. A shoe came flying across from the doorway and caught her on the side of the head, causing her left ear to begin to throb with pain. Madison was trying to understand what Ryan was screaming. The words just not make sense. If not for the pain, she would have sworn she was having another one of her nightmares. While working through what was taking place, she felt the strength of him take her by the elbow and pulling her towards the foot of the bed. She caught the words he liked to use when around the home. But the other ones, those were what was confusing her. Disrespectful, thoughtless, unappreciative. Where were these coming from? Hadn't he seen the note she had left him telling him how she missed him? Or the sticky note she had placed for his dinner, explaining there was food prepared in the microwave if he was hungry? Where was all this coming from? Madison would not have a chance to ask these questions or even try to defend herself. Once pulled off the bed, Madison was dragged from the bedroom, her head hitting the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, instantly causing blood to stream down just above the right eye. Madison could not think straight. Normally, she could have at least followed his warped train of thought. Now, though, she was in total darkness. Still being dragged, she reached for the lamp on the stand just outside their bedroom door. Ryan had seen the attempt. "You want the lamp? Let me get it for you." And with that, no time to react, Madison was hit in the base of her neck with the heavy trunk of the lamp. The cracking noise and the shout of pain that ran down her leg were the last two things she would experience before falling unconscious. And I think that'll be a good place to stop for today. Please join me for Season 2, Episode 3 of My Words, Our Journey, coming soon, when we'll find out what happens to Megan. Thank you, and have a great day.